Wow. Well, it's absolutely great to be here with you this morning. And the way that Dr. Smith opened us up today was just a ball of fire. Wow. Wow. What a treat. And what an incredible team with which he has surrounded himself. I'm the warm-up speaker today for my friend, Dr. Gerald Brooks from Plano, Texas. And one of the things that Gerald taught me is that talent needs a team in order to be terrific. Talent needs a team in order to be terrific. It is interesting to note that a horse, if you just got one horse has the capacity to pull about 9,000 pounds of weight. But if you yoke two horses together and get the teamwork of just one other person with you, it is not accidental that Jesus sent them out by twos. It is not accidental. It is not accidental. One horse can pull 9,000 pounds of weight, but if you get two horses yoked together, they don't pull 18,000, they can pull 27,000 pounds of weight. Just two horses yoked together now become exponential. Exponential. They don't do twice as much. Now it's exponential. This is where the whole multiplication dynamic comes into play. So building a team is really the thing that helps any dream. And if you got something that has been given to you by God in the form of a vision or a dream, it is never solo work. It will always mandate a team. If you can accomplish a dream or a vision that God gives you alone, then it didn't come from God or it's too small. And God would never call you to a dream or to do something that you can do without his help. Why would God take the time to do a complete, unabridged script to a play and then write himself out of the script? So no matter how big your dream is, I'm just telling you, even if you've got prophecy behind you saying that you're going to be great and you're going to do this and change the world, let me just remind you that in front of every prophetic promise, there is always a persistent problem. In front of every prophetic promise, there's always a persistent problem. Yes, the children of Israel had this prophetic promise that there was a promised land ahead of them, waiting for them. But when they got to the Red Sea, that was a persistent problem that they had to figure out, how do we work through this dynamic? How do we get over this, get around this? How do we get through this? It was a persistent problem. God will always write situations that you do not see that are sort of parenthetically inserted into the script as a part of the producer's note, that they will come to this place and they will not know what to do and they'll have to look up to me. I'm writing myself in to where you experience the God factor. And I never want to become so well rehearsed and so scholastic that I know how to do everything and that I can accomplish my success without God. I want that to be the dimension that if God be in it, I mean, I want to attempt something so big for God that it is doomed to fail except God be in it. And so if God is not in it, I pray that it would fail. And that if God's in it, he himself becomes the assurance that this thing will succeed. So when God gives you a vision, start looking around for the partners that he has called alongside you to help. And that's why I'm inspired by the president that God sent here to be with you, because he's a visionary. He's a praying man that will pray and get a vision from God. It's so much easier to ask for God's plan instead of taking your plan and then asking God to bless it. It's to get on your knees ahead of time and say, God, what is it that you want to do through me in this place? God, allow me to dream a God-sized dream that can only be accomplished with your help. I need your help. I need your help. That's where God, I believe, wants us to be. I mean, I got so just excited about the dean here sharing all of the programs here and the tremendous resources that are available to you. It made me want to sign up again all over and become a student all over again. I am a lifelong learner. I'm a lifelong learner. And sometimes I realize that the greatest lessons of life are not learned in a course, they are learned on a course. And they're the people that God has planted alongside your journey that's designed to help us and to equip us. It may be a grandmother who never had the privilege of going to college or to a seminary, but yet how they can inspire a tremendous work of folks that say, come see a man, and that introduce different people one by one. They win an army one by one to Jesus Christ just with the love that they have and the concern for the Great Commission, and realizing that one is never too small a number to make a difference. It only takes a spark to get a fire going, just one. And I remember meeting an old preacher years ago who never had any seminary education, and just giving me just his own formula. And he's in heaven now, and been in heaven many years. But he just taught me a formula that he said: study yourself full, study yourself full, study yourself full, study yourself full. And then he said, think yourself clear, think yourself clear, study yourself full, think yourself clear. Then he said, pray yourself hot. Because there's absolutely nothing like having something that is beautiful and scholastic and orderly and systematic, but no life. So he said, study yourself full, think yourself clear, pray yourself hot, and then let yourself go. You don't want to hold on to the fire, because whatever God has given you is not supposed to stop with you. You only become the steward of it for a particular season. Everybody, when you think about it, is an interim pastor, an interim president, an interim leader, an interim mentor. Everybody is interim because it's only for a season. We notice that because of the dash that's on every birth and death date in a cemetery. It's amazing. And so life is nothing but a dash. Isn't that amazing that everything that you will do in your life on your epitaph is represented by a dash? And the older that you get, the faster that you see how time flies. It is absolutely amazing. But I'm glad that God places us in an atmosphere where we can learn. And it reminds me of even of what the dean talked about, those three areas of the head and the heart and the hands. Because whenever you are tasked to do something, you have to involve all three of those areas, not just one, not two, but all three of them. Even every time that I get ready to communicate with an audience, I am thinking first about the heart, because before you ask for a hand, you need to touch a heart. The heart says, how do you want them to feel? How do you want them to feel? Because it doesn't matter what you know. If you know, I mean, I know that I should do cardio every day, but I don't feel like doing it every day. I know that I should eat fruits and vegetables and, and all of the good stuff. They have good fiber in your system and all of that. Just my knowing it doesn't make me feel like doing it. I know that on the expressway that the speed limit is 55. I know that, but I don't always feel like doing it, particularly when I have someplace to go in a hurry. So knowledge and then doing the right thing, having the conviction to do the right thing. If the conviction is not in the heart, the concept that is in the head is not enough to make you do it. So the first thing in a person's heart, and that's why God gives us vision, because vision engages the heart. Sight is a function of the eyes, but vision is a function of the heart. So the heart engages us, and so the moment that you get a vision from God, we become inspired. We become ignited. I mean, it causes an incendiary kind of reaction in us. The moment that you're touched with a vision from God, it's impossible not to be inspired, and you can feel like I'm getting ready to take over the world. And then we start speaking in a positive way about particular things, and then we come to that persistent problem. We start off speaking the prophetic promise like Superman, and then when we get to the Red Sea, we turn into Clark Kent. And it's amazing because he always wanted our dependence upon him. And so the first thing that I always ask myself is, how do I want them to feel? How do I want them to feel? How do I want them to feel? Because I figured this out about ministry. Ministers don't quit ministry because they get tired. They quit because they become discouraged. It is not tiredness, it is discouragement. And that's why God says, write your vision down. Write it down and then read it so that it'll inspire you to run again. Write it down, write it down, write it down, write it down. Because that's the thing that we are actually then focusing on. Focus comes from an old English word. It is interesting. The word focus literally means fireplace. It literally means fireplace, fireplace. And when you think about this, whenever a person loses their fire, you can go back and trace it always. They have lost their focus. It's like return back to your first love. Return back to your first love. If you lose your fire, you lose your focus, because literally the word focus means fireplace. If you've ever sat in front of a fireplace, there's something riveting about it. There is something warm about it. There's something inviting about it. It's a focus. But there's always a danger associated with focus, because focus produces blindness in some other areas. So whenever you're focused in on one thing, you become blind to some other things that are in periphery. And that's why you always, when you're focused on something, you have to have people that not merely have your back, but people who have your heart. Who have your heart, that will stand with you. And while you're focusing on this, and I'm telling you, I found in ministry that, you know, that second in command to the Holy Spirit is generally your spouse. It is amazing. They don't even have to be involved in all of the intricacies of what all you're doing, but it's amazing how God can use a spouse to just confirm or to lead you, you know, to point you in the right direction. My spouse she's a gift from God that has been used to just direct and sometimes confirm things that God was doing in my life, or to confirm his timing of something in particular. And so getting the heart of a thing, to be able to keep your focus while you're focused on something, you need somebody else that has your heart, that's looking at the other areas, that's saying, hey, honey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you checked with our son lately? Have you checked with our daughter lately? And they can point you to other things that you might be blind to while you're focused in on other things. And a part of, you know, whenever God gives you a vision about something, in particular about building something, about constructing a great vision, whenever God gives you the vision, in addition to counting the cost, a great part of that counting the cost, because you don't just pay for things with money, you pay for things with time. When you go ahead and get an automobile, this is going to be 48 years of your life. Could be 60 months. It's going to be 48 months of your life, or 60 months of your life, or 84 months of your life. When you get a mortgage, you're mortgaging 25 or 30 years. You're paying for it with your time. But you also pay for vision, not only with money and with time, you pay for it with relationships. There's so much more that I could have done when I was younger, but I couldn't afford it with my relationship with my 5 children. I had 5 young children at home. I had a wife at home, and I was not willing to build ministry or to build a vision on the altar of my family. I couldn't afford that. Could I have done more? Yes. Did I do it? No. You know why? Because when I counted the costs, I said to myself, I'm not willing to lose my marriage or my children over this, because I'm going to have to give an account before God. And I don't want to win other people's children to Jesus, and then I have lost my own. And I want to be able to say that, God, I trusted you to do what you've called me to do. So this whole thing in my heart is, how do I want them to feel? Because if we don't feel it in our heart, no matter whether we know that it's right or wrong, we won't do it. It's the fire that's in the heart that gives us the feeling to do the conviction. And see, the next thing is ahead is, what do you want them to know? See, how do you want them to feel? Because if a man wants to get a woman to go out on a date with him, he can't impress her initially with his resume if he doesn't make her feel special. Oh, you have such engaging eyes. My, your hair is stunning. It's how does he want her to feel first? If he doesn't make her feel a certain way, she's not interested in going anywhere with him until he makes her feel a certain way. How do you want them to feel? Secondly, what do you want them to know? After you get the feeling, my name is, then you introduce yourself. Then you start telling them who you are. What you want them to know. Jesus was a master of coming into a person and dealing with how they felt. He got a woman that had been caught in adultery and he was about to be stoned. And Jesus didn't introduce himself and said, hey, I'm Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. No. He says, woman, where are your accusers? He stooped down on her level to connect with her in a powerful way. Connecting, touching her heart before he introduced himself. He made himself known to her, undoubtedly. He taught her law, absolutely. But remember, Jesus came full of grace and truth. He gave her the grace to let her know, I don't condemn you. And I want you to look around. Nobody else is here to condemn you either. But then he gave her the truth. Go and sin no more. He was full of grace and truth. He actually shared his heart with her before he told her what he knew concerning law. And then the third area is your hands. What do you want them to do? What do you want them to do? Once you make people feel a certain way, once you then give them the knowledge of who you are, now, what do you want them to do? I want you to go out on a date with me. I want you to go on a journey with me. But don't ask a stranger to go on a journey with you. Make a friend of them. You know, one of the things before I bring people on my team, beyond looking for calling and character and charisma and competence, I look for this thing called chemistry. Chemistry. And this is the question that I ask myself with the chemistry question. That if I had to get in the car and ride on a trip in the car for 6 hours or 10 hours, would I want to be locked in an automobile with this person for 6 or 10 hours? And if the answer is an emphatic no, then I don't want to do business there with you. It's interesting. Last year I was doing some training over at the Chick-fil-A's headquarters in Atlanta. And I told them, I said, you know, by far, I said, you guys have the absolute best customer service of any fast food service industry. And it is not accidental, it's intentional. It's quite intentional. And I asked, I said, how do you build such great teams? I asked Sister Dan Caffey, how do you guys build such great teams here? And this is one of the things that I discovered. That when they do the interview in the office, they also interview in an off-site. And then once they narrow it down to some candidates, they bring those candidates in to the other teammates, and the other teammates 100% have to agree on the person. And if that person doesn't gel well with the chemistry of the other folks on the team, they will not sacrifice the unity of the team for the one person that they don't vibe with properly. It's interesting that they understand something about teamwork. They understand something about chemistry. Whenever you have chemistry with somebody, it often means that you are connected in kingdom purpose together. And that's why when God gives you a vision, he then also calls people to support that vision. It's amazing that when these kings from Orient saw the star of Jesus Christ, that he was born, they didn't come with Pampers and some soy milk. They came with resources, gold. What a crazy gift, but what a valuable gift. Because you see, when the Lord begins to bring people and call people to start coming to you, even before you're born, when he starts putting your star out in the heavenlies and drawing people your direction, it is amazing what God will do. You do realize that the first order of the day for a leader is that a leader defines reality. Because the power to define is the power to determine destiny. And so, because a leader defines reality, this is why the first thing is direction, 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 direction. Think of it like being in a rowboat together. You want everybody facing the same direction so they are rowing in the same direction. Because direction is so much more important than speed. What difference does it make how fast you can go if you don't know where you're going? In a hurry to nowhere. In order to change from where you are, you must decide where you would rather be. That's the power of a vision. That's the power of vision. It's to be able to move from where you are and to go into where you ought to be. It's determining direction. Which direction are we heading? We want to be in the direction of being able to expose people and broaden their thinkers into not being consumers, but to be problem solvers. That you're not raising up just students, you're not raising up followers, you're raising up leaders, pastors, evangelists, teachers, missionaries. You're raising up government leaders, attorneys, doctors. You're raising them up. You're raising them up. We want to determine direction, direction, direction. And the second thing that they do after they determine direction is then alignment. The alignment of your actions, the alignment of your values, the alignment of the proper relationships and people. There must be an alignment. Alignment, direction, and then alignment. Whatever doesn't fit in this direction, we've got to then streamline some things. There are certain things that we have to add to ourselves, and then some other things that we have to cut away that are not a part of the alignment of who God has called us to be. Once you define that reality, determine that direction, alignment. How do we align ourselves to make sure that everybody is rowing in the same direction, that we're an institution that's too big to hate, that we're rising above it, that this is not just a monolith. We are a pluralistic society of very diverse people from diverse backgrounds, but we're united by the same God that loves us, united by one blood. It is powerful how dreams and visions have the power to unify. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't say, I have a goal, because goals give focus, but dreams give power and they unify. And so when you have a dream, you draw people into that begins to unify them in an absolutely powerful way. It reminds me of how not only does a leader determine direction and then alignment, but then there has to come a commitment. Direction, alignment, commitment. You can't go anywhere unless there's a commitment. And you measure commitment not only in finances, not only in time, not only in values. You measure that in the whole pathos and ethos of who we are. That whole thing of the investment, there must be a commitment. When a student enrolls, you have to be committed to the process. You have to be committed to the process. You have to be committed to the process of being like him. The whole thing is to get our hearts right, so we can get our thinking right, so we can get our actions right in that order. When you come in and try to control external behavior and you've never dealt with a person's thinking and you've never dealt with their belief system, because out of your belief system flow your thinking, and your thinking then control your doing. And if you just come in and try to help people to do better without helping people to think better, we're wasting our time. Direction, alignment, commitment. Direction, alignment, commitment. Direction, alignment, commitment. It is amazing that oftentimes before God can expose the different dimensions of who we are and who we are to be, he has to move us from where we are. He calls us from a place. He spoke to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12 and said, get up and go into a place where I will show you. I'm going to show you. I'm not going to tell you everything. I'm going to lead you there by faith. I've got some surprises. You're going to find some God factor moments there. You get up and go into the place that I will show you. It is absolutely amazing that when God told Abraham to do that, he said, Abraham, now I want you to look up into the sky. Come out of your tent. Come out of everything that is man-made. Come out of man-made systems and ideologies. And look up, get above the circumstances and the situations of where you are. Get above your poverty thinking. Get above limited understanding. Get above it. Look up toward heaven. He's 75 years old. He said, I'm too old to do this. It reminds me of my own daddy. You know, I'm a unique mixture of a fourth generation preacher on my mother's side. My great-granddaddy, great-great-granddaddy, all of these were pastors on that side. And then on my daddy's side, business people. And I realized when I came into ministry that I didn't have to choose between God and money. I only had to choose which one I was going to serve. And I made the decision a long time ago, Lord, I'm going to serve you. And I watched my daddy at 75 years old. It reminded me so much of Abraham. I watched my daddy at 75 years old dream a dream, and he went over to Alabama and he bought a resort over there, multi-million-dollar place, 700 acres of land. He's 75 years old. And he's buying a huge place in Alabama at 75. He's just dreaming. And I went there with my dad, and he's just showing me different things. And then that year, we had our whole family there for Thanksgiving. It was a 91-room motel and natural hot mineral spring spa. And we had the whole family there. And my dad had all 6 of his sons. It reminds me of what Dr. Rogers was mentioning in tribute to his own father. We are who we are because of those who've gone before us and have laid a foundation in our life. And my daddy, my great daddy at 75 years old, had all 6 of his sons to kneel down before me. I'm number 4 out of 6. And my dad took a vial of oil out of his pocket. And he laid his hands on each one of his sons and spoke a prophetic Abrahamic-style blessing over our lives. I am doing today what my father spoke by powerful prophetic impartation into my life. It was that transformed something on the inside. It had nothing to do with money. When the Bible says that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, it is to say that the greatness of God cannot be exhausted in one generation, to where we even come to an inkling of an understanding of the nature of God in just one generation. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he needed a place where he could manifest it, to where I'm going to use you, Abraham, because you're going to be a man who will be faithful to teach his children and command his household afterwards. Abraham had 318 trained men in his house. And God says, I'm going to use you, mister, because you are going to train other people with what I've trained you. I believe that that's why God brought a Dr. Smith into this place. Because what he will get from connection with God, he's going to be faithful to be able to commit it to others and charge them and help to transform who they are. But when God stepped out, I was an accountant for about 15 years. And so I'm really good with numbers, so good with numbers, I've counted to infinity twice. But when God told Abraham to get out and to look up to the stars, scientists tell us that there are actually 10 sextillion stars in the heavens. 10 sextillion. That's a lot of stars. 10 sextillion stars. That's a lot of stars. It's 1,000 to the 7th power. That's a 1 followed by 21 zeros. Let me make it a little clearer to you. We all know what a million is. 1,000 million is a billion. 1,000 billion is a trillion. 1,000 trillion is a quadrillion. 1,000 quadrillion is a quintillion. 1,000 quintillion is a sextillion. Scientists tell us that there are 10 sextillion stars in the heavens. And God tells Abraham at 75 years old, look up. And he's reminding Abraham, you believe in me for how many sons? And he says, look up at that. And he says, so shall your seed be. Anybody can count the numbers of seed in an apple, but only God can count the number of apples in the seed. It is amazing that he would say, look up. Look up, look up, look up. My God, there's so much more that meets the eye that is blind to you that you do not see. You don't see everything because you're not always looking in the right direction. And God says, is anything really too hard for me? I mean, do you see how big and vast this universe is? And you're asking me for one little son? Do you not think I'm able to do this? And 9 months after he had that experience, his son was born. Because faith is not just auditory. It's not, I know faith comes by hearing, but faith is actually seeing as God sees. And when you see it, that's when you get the revelation. Revelation is the word apocalypse. It is the unveiling. You have to see something. We see it. We see it. We see it. And so he brings us into a knowledge of being able to actually see this thing. We see it. There's something about being able to see it. And vision always produces provision. Provision is for the vision. Provision is for the vision. And it'll always be bigger than what you can accomplish on your own. It'll always be bigger. And you'll need it. And there's always a process. There's always a process. Because there's a chasm. There's a Red Sea that you're going to have to cross. The bridge between knowledge and skill is called practice or study. The bridge between knowledge and skill is called practice. It's called study. The bridge between skill and mastery is called time. And the bridge between a dream and reality is called action. It can't just stay in the vision. At some point, you got to make some lunch appointments. At some points, you got to send some emails and make some telephone calls. At some points, it's putting your shoes on and walking out the vision that I'm here because of something that I saw that is bigger, but this is a part of that. And it is not disdaining doing this step in order to get to that, because arriving is the process, and people fall in love with the results and they abhor process. But you can't have one without the other. This is a part of the process. The process. I've watched young people that will see somebody operating in ministry and they said, that's what I want to be. But the desire to preach without the burden to study and to pray is nothing but a desire to perform. And it is amazing that God would draw us into a place and he would introduce us to something that sometimes touches us in such a way that says, my God, this is God. And myself growing up in the church world, and I first heard the voice of God at 7 years old, but I didn't try to preach at 7 because I refused to misconstrue a call to preparation with a call to action. Jesus called disciples unto himself that walked with him for 3.5 years. You never confuse the call with the commission. He called them and then he trained them and then he sent them. If God has an option of using somebody who's willing or somebody who's willing and able, who do you think he's going to call? He's going to send the one that is both willing and who has been capacitated to go. It's amazing. And there were certain places that I have been that God spoke to me years in advance and he said, so-and-so is going to call you at a certain time. I want you to get the message ready that I will deliver through you. And I would get a message ready sometimes years in advance and just put it in a drawer and wait for the call. And sure enough, without any finagling or manipulation on my part, here comes the call. Because he calls us in order to prepare us. It's like a summon. It's the call to come to boot camp. This is a training ground, preparing people not to just go and do something dealing with exegesis and hermeneutics and homiletics, but something that empowers people, that lights a fire on the inside of you, to where once you leave that you still keep burning with a desire to learn and to grow and to change. It keeps us falling in love with him. I wasn't satisfied as a child just to learn John 3:16. You know, I read it in the Bible that in Luke 23, that Jesus, he took the Bible and beginning at Moses that wrote Genesis and Exodus, began to expound to them the scriptures concerning him. And so I wanted to know him. I'm like, God, that I might know you, not only in the glory of your resurrection, but also in the fellowship of your sufferings. I want to know what you went through. I want to understand something about the price that you paid trying to help people who broke your heart. I want to know, I want to be able to understand something about the fellowship of the sufferings of Christ. I want to see you in the book. I began to pray just as a young teenager until I said, God, you know, and I saw that in Genesis, he is the seed of the woman. In Exodus, he's the Passover lamb. In Leviticus, he's our high priest. In Numbers, he's the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. In Deuteronomy, he is a prophet like unto Moses. In Joshua, he is the captain of our salvation. In Judges, he's our judge and lawgiver. In Ruth, he's our kinsman redeemer. In 1 and 2 Samuel, he's a trusted prophet. In Kings and Chronicles, he is our reigning king. In Ezra, he's a faithful scribe. In Nehemiah, he's a rebuilder of the broken down walls of human life. In Esther, he's our Mordecai. In Job, he's our day spring on high and our ever-living Redeemer, for I know that my Redeemer liveth. In Psalms, he's the Lord our shepherd. I shall not want, who makes me to lie down in green pastures. In Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, he's our wisdom. In Song of Solomon, he's the lover and the bridegroom. In Isaiah, he's the Prince of Peace. In Jeremiah, he's the righteous branch. In Lamentation, he's the weeping prophet. In Ezekiel, he's the wonderful four-faced man and the wheel in the middle of a wheel. In Daniel, he's the fourth man in the burning fiery furnace. In Hosea, he's the faithful husband forever married to the backslider. I just want you to understand that this Jesus, in Joel, he's the baptizer with the Holy Ghost and with fire. In Amos, he's our burden bearer. In Obadiah, he's a mighty to save. In Jonah, he's a great foreign missionary. In Micah, he's a messenger of beautiful feet. In Nahum, he's the avenger of God's elect. In Habakkuk, he's God's evangelist crying, revive thy works in the midst of the years. In Zephaniah, he's the savior. In Haggai, he's the restorer of God's lost heritage. In Zechariah, he's a fountain opened up in the house of David for sin and uncleanness. And in Malachi, he's the son of righteousness rising with healing in his wings. Who is this King of glory? You lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be ye lifted up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. In Matthew, he's the Messiah. In Mark, he's the wonder worker. In Luke, he's the Son of Man. In John, he's the Son of God. In Acts, he's the Holy Ghost. In Romans, he's our justifier. In 1 and 2 Corinthians, he's our sanctifier. In Galatians, he's the Redeemer from the curse of the law. In Ephesians, he's the Christ of unsearchable riches. In Philippians, he's our God who shall apply all of our needs according to his riches in glory. In Colossians, he's the fullness of the Godhead bodily. In 1 and 2 Thessalonians, he's our soon coming King. In 1 and 2 Timothy, he's our mediator between God and man. In Titus, he's a faithful pastor. In Philemon, he's a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. In Hebrews, he's the blood of the everlasting covenant. In James, he's the great physician. In 1 and 2 Peter, he's our soon coming shepherd who shall appear with the crown of unfading glory. In 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, he's love. In Jude, he's the Lord coming with 10,000 of his saints. And in Revelation, he's King of kings and Lord of lords. He's still alive. He's still well. He's still believing. He's still giving vision to men and to women. He's still doing it. He's able sacrifice. He's Noah's rainbow. He's Abraham's ram in the thickets. He's Isaac's well. He's Jacob's ladder. He's Judah's scepter. He's Moses' rod. He's Elijah's mantle. He's Elisha's staff. He's Gideon's fleece. He's Samuel's horn of oil. He's David's slingshot. He's Isaiah's figs. He's Hezekiah's sundial. He's Peter's signs and wonders. He's John's pearly white city. He is the King of glory. And I'm absolutely amazed. I'm absolutely amazed and blown away that a God like that, who reveals himself through the scriptures to us in a way that becomes deeply personal, would trust fallible human beings. Because Jesus wants to move through people who have more concern for people's humanity than they do for their own hermeneutics. And I remember just a few years ago, I have 8 grandchildren. One of my granddaughters, about 4 years old at the time, she came in right in between our services and she said, "Gee, Daddy," she said, "I want to color." And there she was. I gave her a piece of paper and I only had one crayon, and I gave her the little piece of crayon. And she started coloring because she's very artistic. And she was coloring her picture, and in the process of making her picture, she pressed too hard. And that one little piece of crayon broke. And she started crying. But they call me G-Daddy, and G-Daddy is trying to make it better, and so I get down on her level. And I said, "Sweetheart, you see your cousin over there?" I said, she wanted to color too, but I only had one piece of crayon. I said, "Now you've got something to share." I said, "Until you're broken, you have nothing to share." And G-Daddy was dropping revelation on his 4-year-old granddaughter, and I thought that it would help her to stop crying, but she was still crying. And I prayed on the inside. I said, "God, help me to make this real to her on a level where she can understand it." And intuitively, I just picked up that broken piece of crayon and started moving it across the paper. And I said these words as I moved the crayon: broken crayons, still color. Broken crayons, still color. And the water in her eyes dried up and a smile broke out on her face, because she saw that even in her brokenness, that she had enough efficacy in the piece of broken crayon to finish the work. And though you've gone through the brokenness of depression, the brokenness sometimes of financial distress, the brokenness of strained relationships, sometimes the brokenness of divorce, it's amazing that God knew everything that would break in you along the journey, and he called you already knowing your breakage, and said, "I will not allow that to disqualify you from finishing the mission of which I have ordained for your life, because broken crayons still color." And I encourage you today that though something has snapped and broken in your life, understand that you can still finish the vision, because broken crayons still color. God bless you. I love you. It's been my joy.